Okay, I'm going to finish up Bacon. I usually do them in one video really quickly, but I do want you to see how some of these ideas play out because he really fleshes it out as the piece goes on. And this is at 46, Roman numeral 46. He says, the human understanding, when it has once adopted an opinion, either as being the received opinion or as being agreeable to itself, draws all things to support and agree with it. Now, that might seem a little bit fluffy and a little bit vague, but what he's talking about is how human understanding, it's Kahneman and Tversky called this confirmation bias. It's when you have a certain perspective on the world, you will go about your day finding more confirmation of that perspective. And you see this whenever you watch the news, whether or not you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion about a certain person or a certain party or something like that, you will tend to vacuum up information that confirms that perspective. So that's a real serious problem in the sciences. And it still is. This is one of the reasons why we have groups look at problems, not individual persons or individual studies. What has to be done is that other experts within the field must go through this research that was done at one university or one institute or one lab here or there. You want people who are independent to look over the research in order to check it if there was any trace of confirmation bias. And you might think, well, a scientist wouldn't do that. The scientist is human and would certainly do that and would love to be the one to find the cure for the disease and all the attention that comes with it. One lab has already announced that it believes it has, a vaccination for the coronavirus, and that was apparently an attention-getting stunt. So this is done all the time, and why we have the notion of peer review is to control for that. So if a lab has something, valuable to put forward, it will be known by other experts in the field, and that will address whether or not there was a case of confirmation bias. In other words, somebody looking for research or looking for confirmation of their already biased perspective on this situation or that situation. Okay? And so moving on a bit, and this is going to 46 a little bit later on. And again, that number down there is 47. Besides independently of that delight and vanity which I have described, it is a peculiar and perpetual error of the human intellect to be more moved and excited by affirmations than by negatives. That is an aspect that's built within the human mind, for better or worse. We love to hear reinforcement of our ideas, of our notions, of our actions, of everything. That need for affirmation is built into humans. That's not built into scientific methods, which are designed in very much the opposite way. In good scientific discussions over relatively new research, what you will get is an enormous amount of negativity, of challenges to the reliability of the information. Do those challenges hold up is the big question. Okay, so that's why we have groups of experts in the field peer review, examine something, and they are not looking to send you a thank you card. They are looking for problems in the research. So if the human mind is already built for excited by affirmatives, the scientific method is built around the exact opposite. So it controls for that human tendency. Human understanding is moved by those things which strike and enter the mind simultaneously and suddenly. And this is also very much the case. It's novelty. We are struck by things that stand out. that don't fit in within the pattern. This is part of the reason why fruits and things like that are colored bright red and things like that, and we pay attention to those things. So we are attracted to novelty. That doesn't mean that's true in most cases, that this particular instance that caught my attention can be generalized. It might be an exception to the rule, okay? So that attraction to novelty is part of the human animal. And let's jump up a little bit. And this is on 49, okay? And again, I know the Roman numerals can be a little bit tricky at first, but I was born about 2,000 years ago, so I got it down pretty well. Therefore, he rejects difficult things from impatience of research, sober things because they narrow hope, the deeper things of nature from superstition, the light of experience from arrogance and pride, lest his mind should seem to be occupied with things mean and transitory, things not commonly believed out of deference, to the opinions of the vulgar. And think back to the start of this piece about the modesty of how science moves forward. It doesn't look for the confirmation of the various idols of the tribe that he just spelled out. It challenges each one of those through that modesty. Difficult things rejected from impatience. In other words, immediate gratification in results. Good science often takes an enormous amount of time. They aren't exciting. Good research is not latest research. Good research that's valuable in a field is research that's been confirmed over and over again. That's the notion of reliability. When he says sober things, I would say reliable things, okay? And those are not very interesting. The deeper things of nature from superstition. So in other words, they go with what they've heard of before and what they would like to have, be true. The light of experience from arrogance and pride, lest his mind should seem to be occupied with things mean and transitory. Mean and transitory are the things you're going to pick up from observation. These are the petty little things that over time are going to add up to an insight. Okay? So things that we let go as being not really worth our attention, and again, it's the less interesting on the surface, and the mean are going to be the building blocks of our reality. Those are going to be the things we're going to ignore. Okay? And again, the deference to the opinion of the vulgar, a way to fit in is to agree with the common knowledge. Okay? And just moving on, I'll wrap this up fairly soon. Matter rather than form should be the object of our attention. Its configuration and changes of configuration in simple action and law of action or motion. For forms are figments of the human mind, unless you will call those laws of action forms. Now, this touches again, anybody in his time would have recognized this as a basic split between Aristotle and Plato. Matter rather than forms should be the object of our attention. In other words, what things are. What is this? Rather than why is it important? What does it mean? What is it? Observe it and take down what's going on. That's the importance of observation. Understanding the particulars. And then from the particulars, you put together the generals, eventually, the guiding principles. But don't expect it to confirm what you've already learned about the world, because by paying attention to the particular, you're going to learn eventually something new. Okay? Are figments of the human mind. When he talks about this, and he's making a distinction, the forms are the ideals. Those are out of Plato. The ideal forms, you may remember, that everything has an ideal. The forms are figments of the human mind. In other words, they have no importance to understanding the world. And then he says, unless you will call these laws of action forms. When he talks about laws of action, he's talking about the eventual conclusions of long observation. So those laws of action became the language of the laws of physics. In other words, understanding how gravity really works, understanding how cell reproduction works, how these things work. If they're really universal, they get the title of a law within science. So he's saying that these laws, these are extraordinarily reliable principles that play out in nature. Something like all living things are made of cells. That's a law of nature. Once we found out that we have never found a living thing without cells, we can generalize that even if we don't look at this living thing, it's got cells. That becomes a law. In other words, we don't have to be there to observe the particularities of it, because in every single circumstance, then it's a law. That is not a form, but it acts like a form, but not in the same real manner. Forms or things are figments of our imagination. What we like are figments of deductive reasoning. Laws are the results of patient, inductive reasoning. Okay? So those are the eventual things you learn, or laws of nature, at a deeper level. Those are more reliable. Okay? Contemplation of nature and of bodies in their simple form break up and distract the understanding, while contemplations of nature and bodies in their composition and configuration overpower and dissolve the understanding. A distinction well seen in the school of Leucippus and Democritus as compared with the other philosophers. These are Greek philosophers who were writing about the world. And again, Bacon would have been well schooled in this. And this is something that Aristotle was a part of too. They were making movements in the world based on their observation. They were not working in the notion that Plato was working in, coming up with ideals through abstractions. They were working with particulars, instances, singularities, not with overarching ideas that have been derived from deduction. Okay? I'll leave it there. You now do have a good grasp of Bacon and how he plays things out. It's very important not to walk away from Bacon thinking that deductive reasoning is somehow faulty. It is a type of reasoning that works in a shockingly reliable manner within itself. That's how math works. How mathematics and physics, primarily physics, is now deductive, a lot of deductive reasoning. They cannot derive many empirical experiments to test, say, much of string theory. But they can work it out based on likelihoods and levels of reliability within the mathematics of it. So deductive reasoning is an extraordinarily powerful form of reasoning, but on its own, it cannot do much about the natural world. It simply cannot. You need observation in moving from the other direction. So understand that deductive reasoning finds general principles that are true, okay, and applies them throughout the world. That's how mathematics works, okay? But with inductive reasoning, you work from observations of the world. There is no way just by walking around, talking to people, looking at plants and things like that, to realize that they are all made up of cells. You have to do careful observation over the course of a long period of time before you can come up with the insight that all living things are made out of cells. That is the type of reasoning that was lacking in Bacon's day, and the type of reasoning he would really push in order to get the Renaissance going, in order to have the revolution within thinking take place, and that Bacon was central to it. Okay, I'll leave it there. Take care, you guys.